All right, Jesse, let's move on. All right. Gather Round has just happened, Jesse. Did you know that? It's your favorite thing.
Yeah, I couldn't miss it between the 80 million mentions of Gather Round. Look, I'm going to say something nice about Gather Round.
Oh.
I do think Adelaide's done quite a good job as a city in embracing the concept. I think it's a bad concept,
Sure.
but I think Adelaide's embraced it quite well. And good for them. They've clearly taken the bull by the horns and run with it. And I think it's important, again, to not talk in absolutes here. I don't like Gather Round, but I also acknowledge that plenty of people do.
Sure.
Much like I like Fremantle, I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't. The best thing about having an opinion is that someone else can disagree with me, and that's fine. But I'm not a fan of Gather Round. I think it adds to poor equalisation in the competition and lopsides things against interstate non-South Australian teams, which is 6, soon to be 7 in the competition. But South Australia are doing a good job. Now, I would like to see it be shared around / move to opening round so we can fit the entire start of the season circus in one go and stop the silliness. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I can look at the objective metrics and say this is here to stay inevitably. I'm going to complain about it every year, as is my right. But Gather Round is here to stay.
It is. And have your thought? What do you think about Gather Round, people? At CMPerfect_AFL on Insta if you want to get involved. And let us know what your thoughts are about the games, because we've got 9 of them to go through across the weekend in Adelaide.
The one good thing about Gather Round, we get a full round at this point in the season instead of ridiculous buys.
We've got a few of those coming up, which is fantastic. There you go. 1 second there, Jesse. All right. Here we go. We are starting Thursday night, Gather Round, at Adelaide Oval. Surprise, surprise. Adelaide 15-10-100, defeated by Geelong 18-11, 119 in front of 50,073. I will say this first up. Good game of footy, obviously very high scoring. We'd love to see that. God damn, Geelong are annoying. They're so annoying. Adelaide in that first half should have blown them off the park. And it wasn't like they weren't scoring. But Geelong just always know how to keep themselves in it just enough so that when the second half comes around, they can do whatever they want. It's on their terms. It's just like, obviously if you're a Geelong fan, you're loving it. And obviously as a footy fan, I kind of love it as well. But God, just one time, Dangerfield looks like he's playing in his 3rd or 4th season.
Yeah.
He's amazingly good this season. Oh boy. I mean, look, Adelaide, I think, showed promise still. I don't think we're going to write them off just yet. Geelong are going to be up there at the top of the table. They didn't embarrass themselves. So, look, I think lots to like about the Crows as well. Jesse, your thoughts?
I have a couple. I want to start with Dangerfield, given you've brought him up early on. Yes. I think what we're seeing with Dangerfield now is we're seeing Patrick Dangerfield get a run at AFL football injury-free. Touch wood. I don't think Patrick Dangerfield ever lost his class or ability.
Sure.
I think we just haven't seen it because he's been injured. And they've had to monitor his minutes, adjust where he's playing, what he's doing.
I was going to say, like pushing him forward, right? They're pushing him a lot more forward.
But now he's healthy and he seems like, and obviously I'm not Patrick Dangerfield's hamstring. If I was, I'd probably be quite strong. But it seems like that's fit and firing now, and he's playing like he's confident in his body. And that 10% change in psychology, and even if it's a 2% change in physiology that we've seen from recent seasons, it's making all the difference. Now, Geelong are very, very good again. They're going to be, I think they're going to be underrated all season because there is an element of fatigue with Geelong. It's, they're Geelong, they're going to be around there somewhere. But I actually think we're at the point now where Geelong are going to be perennially underrated this season because they're so professional. Even in the St Kilda game, they kicked themselves out of that in the last 5 minutes. That game was theirs to lose and they lost it. But you look at games like this.
Do you think that Geelong are just going to be just underrated forever because we're all, pardon me, frog in the throat. Do you think that Geelong are just criminally underrated all the time is because we're all expecting that drop? We're all expecting that fall off the cliff.
Well, the last time Geelong was bad, I was 5. Now, I'm an adult with a mortgage and a football podcast, and I'm still collecting footy cards. So maybe not everything's changed. But that just goes to show, like, in the grand scheme of things, to talk about a past life, my first season on the footy show in 2007, my biggest footballing memory outside of Fremantle and the footy show that season was Geelong absolutely obliterating Richmond by about 170 points in round 6 of that year. Now, obviously, round 6 is coming up. Could that happen next week? We don't know. But what we've seen now from Geelong is almost 2 decades of sustained success. That does get boring. You talked about the Premier League before. It does get boring for fans of not of that club, but that shouldn't be to the detriment of what the Geelong Footy Club's football department and playing group are doing. They're doing a superb job.
Yeah.
On Adelaide, tough loss to the Gold Coast. They'll be disappointed to have lost this game. There's been questions about the 4 tall forward lineup that Nix is going with. I reckon you double down and you back it in. I reckon it does work. Now, you got to caveat that with the fact that when they play against sides specifically like Geelong, it may not always work. But I think this is a genuine possibility to be a deep September finals matchup between these two sides this season. And I wouldn't want Adelaide to be thrown off course by the fact it didn't work out for them on Thursday.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's I'm hoping that Adelaide have a good season this year, because I think for the last few I've been like, come on, boys, you can do it. But I think they've got a good chance this year. Let's move on, Jesse, to the next round on Friday night at also Adelaide Oval. 16-13, 109 to Collingwood, defeating the Swans 12-6, 78 in front of 47-649. A couple of healthy crowds there. A healthy crowd there for a game including non-Adelaide teams, which is what you want to see from Gather Round. Imagine if there was 45 people there. I mean, the Pies keep getting it done, don't they? I'll let you lead the way, Jesse, on this one.
Yeah, we'll talk Collingwood first to Victor go the spoils. They're a good side, and the hangover from 2023 seems to be largely gone.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about Collingwood, and I was thinking about this actually before the game, when I was sitting down to have a look at kind of stats, who might be effective in the Collingwood forward line, and I couldn't decide whether it was going to be Bobby Hill, Tim Membry, any of these guys in the forward line. Your usual suspects that bob up. Who's going to be the Collingwood key forward? Jamie Elliott. Who's going to be the Collingwood forward to go and get that done? It was Bobby on Friday. Could have been someone else, but I think that's the excitement of Collingwood. They've got a very unconventional forward line, much like Adelaide do, but in a very different way. These aren't your atypical AFL forward lines of the last decade. They're doing it differently, and they're two of the teams that the most exciting brand of footy to watch this season. Pendlebury is ageless.
Another one that just doesn't age, does he?
But they've clearly recognised that minute management is crucial.
Yeah.
From now on, and they're not running him into the ground. They're playing based on what he feels like he's able to do, and that's working. And that's just smart football and smart man management at the end of the day. Sydney, look, I saw this coming, to be honest. I know you were a bit hotter on the Swans than I was.
Well, I mean, look, you say hotter on Swans. If you haven't watched our Just the Tips episodes yet, go watch them. We know that I don't go on hot or cold. I go on vibes. And my vibes are telling me that the Swans, after the last couple of wins they had, were probably starting to turn a corner. But a 5-goal loss is probably a bit overs for what I'd be expecting, even against Collingwood, for a team that is going to contend again this year based on where they currently are.
I just look at Sydney and I look at the way they played on Friday, and I question, apart from a very nice Guernsey, what do you offer?
Yeah.
And what are you offering in terms of attacking output? And it looks like attacking output has become the order of the day this season, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And there are teams being left behind in that, and I think Sydney are chief among those. That they cannot go with teams that are willing to go after them. It has to be set up in a very specific way. The two teams they've beaten are Fremantle, defensive-minded, and North, who are still very much figuring out that identity and the way they want to set themselves up in attack. So 2 games you'd probably expect them to win or would be winnable.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the games they've lost, you're talking teams like Hawthorn and Collingwood, aggressive, get after you football sides who make life hard. And even throughout the game, at what point did you think Sydney was going to win this game? I didn't really feel at all like Collingwood were under serious sufferance at any point.
No, I was watching this with a mate who's a Sydney Swans supporter, and you could hear the frustration, in their voice, because I think you could tell from pretty early on that it wasn't going to be going well for the Swans at the end of the day. And Amani now out for a little while with a hamstring, I believe. So it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back from this, or what they do up forward, because they're losing a lot of targets. I mean, Heaney and Warner, Chad, seem to be the key goal kickers at the moment, and that's running from the 50 and bombing it long. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Swans, but be a disappointing loss for them. Shall we move on, Jesse?
Let's.
Oh yeah. Gather round in the Barossa on Saturday morning. North Melbourne 13-11-89, defeated by the Suns 21-15, 141.
That's
Suns.
a lot of goals.
It's a lot of goals. It is a lot of goals.
And a lot of points too.
Pretty much it's all the second half. It's all the second half. I think this is the story, the tale of the tape for North this year, I find, is just that, and a lot of the younger teams who are progressing, we'll see it with Richmond later on as well. First half competitive, second half just kind of doesn't, they run out of steam pretty early on, or they kind of, I guess, forget what they're doing, where they're at. I'm not too sure what it is, but the Suns, man, undefeated. Who'd have thunk it? I mean, they've had a pretty nice start to the season, but who'd have thunk it?
They've had a very nice fixture, haven't they?
Wow.
And really, I reckon that they pretty clearly beat Essendon, so there really should be another win on top of that as well.
Well, let's. You still got to win them. You still got to win them, and they've been winning them quite convincingly, one might say.
I mean, they've beaten the only side that I would really say, trouble, which is Adelaide. They got that job done. So it remains to be seen where the Suns go from here. But confidence is key here, and these younger players who haven't really had a lot of wins in that win-loss column, if you weigh it out over 3, 4, 5 years, they're starting to get wins, and they're starting to know what that feels like, and they're starting to want to really maintain that. So big positives for Gold Coast. North, it was better than it was last week, and that's a big positive. The end margin will be disappointing, I think, in totality for a lot of people, but that's an improvement. And I think looking forward, this may not end up being as bad of a loss as it looks in the cold light of day. Yeah,
no, hard to argue. I don't think there's really too much to say. Just shy of 10,000 in the Barossa there, but onwards and upwards for the Suns, and we'll see where the Kangaroos go from here. Anything else to add, Jesse? Shall we move on? Let's move on. On Saturday, April 12th, again, I don't have to say the date every time, Jesse. Just tell me, Liam, it's still Saturday. Everyone knows which Saturday you're talking about. My apologies.
17 just wait until they make Omni Round, where it's spread over 8 weeks, intermittently throughout other games.
Look, another NBA reference. It'll be like the mid-season cup, just a tournament within the season.
Is that a thing?
Not? Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine if this was the 3-point play NBA podcast, and I had to deal with that? Like, gather round roofed stadiums in Tasmania, an opening round are bad enough. Yep. And you'd expect me to deal with that. Wouldn't happen.
No. We wouldn't subject you to that, Jesse. Wouldn't subject you to that. Anyway, we've distracted ourselves from the game we were meant to be talking about, I suppose.
First point of contention, if there were 41,000 people there, then there's 80,000 people going to the Waffle this weekend, and they're all supporting Estremanel. And that's just as believable as that, because that's simply not accurate.
That is accurate.
No, it's not. It's what the figure says. There were not 41,000 people there.
I see. So it's kind of like your wrestling. They kind of inflate the numbers to look better. Is that what you're saying?
This was actually held at the Silverdome.
Brother, listen, let's talk about the game, okay? We have to.
No, it was really boring.
Carlton.
This is more entertaining than whatever that was. I know George Stewart, he got the ball so much.
Yes.
Next game.
Well, people don't even know who George Stewart plays for. Carlton 17-19, 121, defeating the West Coast Eagles 6-14. 50. Oh boy, Eagles. Have they hit rock bottom yet, Jesse?
I thought it hit rock bottom when they were obliterated by Sydney in 23.
Oh yeah, that was bad.
That was really bad. I think that is rock bottom, but the speed at which they're scaling the mountain is starting to slow down, and it was already at a very pedestrian rate.
Yeah.
Which ties in nicely to our chat earlier about the CBA. But yeah, this is really disappointing from West Coast. This was a winnable game for them.
Yep.
Based on what we'd seen from Carlton. The fact that Richmond, a side that's probably in that bottom four bracket with West Coast, was able to get the job done. So you go into this game and you think, right, we can get up for this and we can win this game of football. That's got to be the mentality going on. And yet, they were dreadful.
Yeah.
They were really poor.
I think I was reading something about the Eagles today in relation to their new kids and how a lot of them aren't ready or aren't prepared to train at AFL level yet, which I thought was quite an interesting take from one of the more senior players at the club.
Yeah.
I think
that was Waterman, wasn't it? Yeah, that's the last thing I want to be hearing from a West Coast fan. If you're telling me that you're bringing in players into the program, and I acknowledge that some will be 18, 19,
sure,
however the case may be, but you look at some other 18, 19-year-olds, they've assimilated into the senior team. They've played 3, 4, 5 games at AFL level.
Bruce.
Reed's a great example. I mean, before his hamstring, you could throw Law in that. Richmond had a lot of guys go straight in.
Mm-hmm.
North have blooded. Essendon have blooded. Guys like Kako gone straight in. But you're telling me they're not even up to the training standard?
Yeah.
After what would now be 5 months, because you'd start in December as a first-year player. That's a real... That's crisis levels for me. Yeah. To be fair, Gross looks the goods.
Yep.
And I think there's a player in there. I think there's a really quality player in there. It's always hard to judge West Coast without Waterman because he's become so integral to the way that they play. To be clear, they were bad. That's part's not hard to judge.
Yes.
But games like the Derby, I genuinely feel could have been very different if Waterman was on that field. Because it seems like the way West Coast is setting up is purely, can Waterman do everything, please? And sometimes he will do some very good things because he's a very good player. But when he's not out there, you're relying on Oscar Allen, who really doesn't want to be there to do it, or Liam Ryan to play 10 centimetres taller. And you want to talk about good games? Ryan fits that bill.
Yep.
But it's disappointing. You've got, like, Harley Reid's had to be kicked out of set of bounces because he's not fit enough. Do you want to talk about training standards? That's where you start. He's doing well off halfback. He's using the ball a lot better than he was in the midfield, but he's your guy. And McWalter's had to move another magnet to try and paper over cracks. They're dropping senior players every week. Duggan, I know it's easy to bash guys like Duggan and Allen at the moment. And you can throw Kelly in that bracket as well. But
you can have something to lift. You can have someone to lift. And they don't seem to be those people.
These are senior players at the club. You know, Duggan's a co-captain.
Yeah.
And not only is he poor on field, he's not even leading by example. You can have a captain that's out of form that is still doing the non-negotiables, like chasing, putting that pressure on, getting the 1%ers done. You know, form does turn around.
Yeah.
But the 1%ers aren't even there. It's like looking at one of my math tests from high school. Just zeros everywhere.
That's because it was the answer to the math question, surely, Jesse.
Yes, obviously.
Every single question. 0. Let's quickly talk about Carlton. They won their first game of the season, which is going to be a big relief for them because I'm pretty sure if they had lost this, it would have been the funniest thing in history, but also really sad. But they won quite easily, but I don't think anyone is going to get too excited about that just yet.
This is the game that we thought Richmond were going to be.
Yep.
They win, we say, they could have won by more. They lose, it's the funniest nuclear meltdown of all time.
Correct. Yep, 100%.
I think 70 is about right from a Carlton perspective. That's probably to the level that they play. I don't think they deserve to win by much more on their output. But with how bad West Coast were, they easily could have lost by more by the same token. So I don't know if this is going to regenerate Carlton's season. I think we need to see more of that. But this is another puncture in a very flat tyre for 2025 for West Coast at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Let's move on to the next game. Jesse, we're heading to Norwood, where the reigning premiers were playing. Bulldogs 14-13-97, defeated by the Lions 18-10, 118 in front of a staggering 9,242 at the flat-sided oval.
Yeah, you want to talk about AFL standards?
Yes.
Let's talk about ground standards. I every time I look at this, I get cross.
I know you do, because every time we mention the word Norwood, you're like, this is flipping ridiculous. It is. Yeah, it's a terrible ground. It's a terrible
Do you want
ground.
to talk about high school maths? Let me grab my protractor and take it onto the 50-meter arc, and we'll measure out some angles.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's there's got to be a better ground somewhere. Can we not use Alberton?
Is that Port
Adelaide really
Adelaide?
said no?
Yeah, yeah. As I was going to say, because
Can we not use anything? There's got to be an oval-shaped ground somewhere that's not a rectangle on one side.
your favourite place, Glenelg.
Yeah, use that.
Yeah. Just have a few guys with a couple of tinnies around the fence. It's fine.
There's that many proud Sandful clubs around.
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that this is the best suburban ground in South Australia from a quality of ground perspective. I'm sure it's fun to watch footy at and very fun and very charming and endearing for the locals that go there every fortnight. And I say that with sincerity.
Yeah.
But without being disrespectful to the state leagues, this is the elite competition. Why are we playing on a half a rectangle?
Yeah. Hard to argue, but we won't talk about that anymore because we've got a game to talk about. A game that people were calling game of the round. And if you actually look at the other games this round, probably not difficult to call it that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the Lions, this is why the Lions are so dangerous. Like, you had Hipwood who had, 3 touches to half time, who just absolutely turned it around in the second half and brought his team back into it. They were 39 points down. 39 points down, I think, in the third quarter, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was before halftime. I can't
It was a
remember.
big turnaround.
It's a big turnaround and very quickly. And, you'd be a bit miffed if you're a Bulldog supporter, but, for a team that is so dire with injuries at the moment, they were going to get tired eventually. I think they're on a short turnaround as well. So, you can see why they kind of petered out. But I think you'd still be pretty disappointed losing a 39-point advantage. Any team would be. But it just goes to show the quality of Brisbane, week in, week out, undefeated this season so far, and not through lack of trying. A lot of these games they've clawed their way back, like you've mentioned, they did last season as well.
I mean, it's one of those. It reminds me so much of Collingwood in 2023. How do they keep getting away with it? And they just seem to get away with it. Look, Brisbane, they'll know that this can't go on. They don't need me to come on here and say that this can't go on. But they're winning games of footy. They're kicking goals without their best key forward, Joe Danaher, who's now long gone. And guys like Hipwood, despite a dreadful first half, are stepping up. The midfield is... I think at this point we can declare that Brisbane's midfield is almost comfortably the best midfield in the competition. You look at McCluggage, the Ashcrofts, Neil, Dunkley. I don't think there's a team in the league that can compete with that.
Yeah.
And if you were to say video game style, they're going in with their max abilities as they're all set to their peak performance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think pound for pound you can beat that.
Yeah, it's hard to argue just based on pure results alone this season. It's a big test for the next week. I think they've got the Collingwood. I think next week.
Big game.
Big game. Huge game. But yeah, woof. Sorry, Rory, didn't get this one done either. Anything else, Jesse, before we move on?
Yeah, I think contextually this loss is worse for the Dogs than you probably think because there's now 2 weeks in a row they should have won. They should have beat Fremantle on the stats board. They should have beat Fremantle. Dominated the ball, more inside 50s. They had the chance to at least win that game, and they didn't.
Yep.
They absolutely had their chance to win this game, and they didn't. Acknowledging the injury problems that they're facing, that's 8 points dropped. That can swing things if you're 7th, and then all of a sudden facing a bit of a surge late from other teams from 9th and below, or you're 8th, Gold Coast have fallen to 9th and they play the last game of the season.
Yeah.
You're totally beholden to that. So remains to be seen how much these winnable losses come back to bite the Bulldogs.
Yeah. No, well said. Let's move on to the next game of Gather Round. We are still on Saturday. Oh,
Skip.
Boy.
Skip.
For those listening, the one that Jesse would like to skip was Melbourne. 8-9-57, defeated by the Bombers 15-6-96 in front of 45,000. Again, for two teams that couldn't pull this in Melbourne, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
They probably couldn't get half of that. Oh, maybe the Bombers. But
the Bombers would have gotten... Yeah. If it was at the G, they probably would have gotten this number. If it was at Marvel... Yeah.
But I think your sentiments of Skip are probably echoed by a few people. This was a terrible game of football. Melbourne continued down into the dearth, Jesse. Down into the dirt they go.
Liam, on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, I declared that viewers would be eligible for financial compensation for having watched Essendon Port Adelaide.
Yep.
And that was a very bad game. That was easily, at that point of the season, the worst game of the season.
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed that, 3 weeks later, I've sat through 3 hours of something worse, and it actually wasn't even Essendon's fault this time. It was how rubbish Melbourne were that made this an offensively bad game of football to watch. And the sooner I actually think I might go on strike and just not watch. I'll do the minis for these games.
Yeah.
For the this week, because of how angry I am that I donated 3 hours of my valuable time.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, we're all going to die. I think at this point, the only fair remittance for this is for Melbourne and Essendon to pay for it to be engraved on my headstone that I watched this game of football and wasted 3 hours of my life. That's the only thing I'll settle for in lieu of $8,000.
Okay, fair enough too, because that's how much it would cost to make the headstone as well. More than likely. Yeah, more is. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. On a Saturday night, no less, Jesse. We could have been doing so many cool things.
And this was, I've got another gather round complaint.
Okay, here we go.
This is at Adelaide Oval.
Yes.
While the Dogs at Brisbane Lions are playing a tip to be square through their speakers like it's 1983. And Fremantle are playing in a cow paddock.
Yeah.
And Gold Coast, and look, I get the cow paddock games, they kind of make sense.
Yeah.
Both teams are all four teams there are quite cow paddocky in various ways.
Sure.
Going forward. But Giants, consensus top 4, chance at least, had to play in a rectangle. This is go back to the start, well before. So off-season last year. Giants probably around that top 4 bracket. They're playing on a rectangle. The reigning premiers, who you already knew were reigning premiers, were playing on a rectangle. Consistent top 8 side, playing on a rectangle. Did anyone actually expect Melbourne and Essendon to be good this season? Never mind both be good to justify a Saturday night time slot in your marquee round at your marquee venue. Stand
alone. This is prime time, Jesse. Prime time footy. Not even the commentators can make this one good. Let's move on. Let's move on to the cow paddock. On Sunday at the Barossa, the Tigers 7-5-47 defeated by the Dockers 16-12-108. We ticked over 10,000 at the Barossa. That's pretty good. Biggest crowd of the weekend in the smaller venues. Hooray. Listen, we watched this game together, Jesse, and I heard your complaining about the ovals and the cow paddocks firsthand, right next to you.
We need merch. We need an action figure for me.
Okay.
That if you press the button, says one of my 8 phrases.
I'm cross.
Sack him now. This is a cow paddock.
Yes. I mean, look, if there's enough...
I love the Coolangatta Airport. It's so efficient.
That'll confuse people, and that's fantastic. I'm in for that.
Did I buy the pilot model?
Yeah. Oh, just a little hat. Just get it's an additional extra that you have to buy.
Of course.
It's the hat. Only one goal for the Tigers in the second half, which goes to show that kind of young team second half fade away mentality. They were leading this game for a good portion of the first and second quarters until Freo just, I guess decided to start playing. Tracy, 6 goals, PB. Well done, son. Jeez. I think, what's that?
He was dominant, wasn't he?
He was so good. And I keep making this joke, but it wasn't just a couple of years ago, Jesse, that we would laugh when I would put a bet on for Tracy to kick 4 goals. Every game I would do it because it was a joke. That's how much that joke meant to me. I would pay $5 every week for it.
Think how many Jesse action figures you could have bought with those $5.
Oh, at least a hat. At least the hat. But no, he's turned into one of the best forwards in the competition, hands down. Your thoughts, Jesse, on the match?
It certainly took a while for Fremantle to get going. I don't think they were even in first gear for the first half. They were in park.
One thing before you continue,
okay?
Because that is still a problem for us. We never get out of first gear until it seems the third quarter. So when we're playing the better teams, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah,
continue.
Big problem. Tracy, you've said what needs to be said. He was absolutely dominant on Sunday. Brayshaw and Sarong, they are so critical to Fremantle's success. They play well. The team plays well. I thought a lot of Freo's small had a good game. I think Shea Bolton's unlucky not to get a feature in the best there. He was excellent. I think Freddie's having a really good season. His best season probably since 2022 as well, which is really good to see from him. And I think the pieces start to come into place. I think Young looked solid in his return. I am concerned about Sean Darcy.
A little bit.
With the caveat that he's coming back off a long-term injury.
I was going to say under-seasoned, right? Just a little bit more seasoned.
But he was unfit last year.
Yeah, but he's cut a lot of kegs, though.
But he's still unfit.
Yeah, that's true. I have lost weight before in my life, and I didn't get any more fitness from that. That's true.
So I think I still have my concerns. It seems like Jackson's rehab is coming along quite well, which is a net positive because I think you're probably going to have to look at either Reedy and Darcy, which I really don't want to do, or Tracy and Darcy, which again,
we don't want to do that.
Undercut. Yeah, I know. I heard apparently Oscar McDonald was floated by Lockie Reed of Channel 10 Sport fame as a potential replacement, which would be quite interesting. I don't know if he would be doing ruck duties to replace Voss, and he certainly wouldn't be doing forward duties because he's not a forward.
Well, actually, we should just mention that as we've been recording, Tribunal has come back with the Voss verdict. He didn't get off. Surprise, surprise. No. 3 weeks for Vossi for his clothesline from hell remains intact. But hey, I'm not surprised. Are you surprised, Jesse?
Not at all.
No, not at all. But yeah, I don't think we want to use Tracy. I think Tracy needs to stay what he's doing. We can't risk him in the ruck. Chuck Coxie in there. Why not?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And look, I will say another nice thing about Gather Round.
Yep.
It is nice to see Lindog get the investment in this ground and use it. And, you know, I'm sure it's a great day out.
I was a huge fan of this ground. I thought it looked amazing. I actually thought this looked like a good country ground. We can go watch a good game of country football and also Freo versus Richmond.
And I know I called it a cow paddock, and, you know, it is.
It's what it used to be. It's what it used to be.
It used to be a field, but it is. I think it's really important to get regional representation into the Australian Football League, and it is nice to be able to see that. I would prefer if we don't have to play at Norwood or Barossa next year, especially if, you know, we are good. But I'm sure we'll, by some fluke, get Gold Coast, and that just about guarantees us Barossa next year as well.
I think we're just perpetually there, Jesse. Anything quickly to say about Richmond before we move on?
Yeah, Tim Taranto interested me a lot. Very eager to throw his weight around. Very uneager to do any effective disposals that are more than a hand pass. That was quite interesting. Nain Curvis is having a fantastic season as well.
He is. Yeah.
He dominated Darcy from go to
woe. But also speaking of leaders for the young kids though, he's one I think that leads quite well by example from the middle as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Now hopefully the Tigers can turn it around soon. I'd like to see the young kids get a win. All right, let's move on to the next game. Jesse, at Norwood, the box, the rectangle, St Kilda 12-10-82, defeated by the Giants 16-14, 110 in front of 9,235. They're a professional unit this year, aren't they? The Giants. They know how to get things done, and Saints are coming off a very good run of form. But it is April now, so that's all over.
Lower the flag.
But no, what are your thoughts on this one, Jesse? Actually, before I get, shut up, Jesse. My turn. Wangadeen Miller. I'm now starting to see why they were going to offer him so much more. He is a very good young player.
He is.
Proceed.
Give him all of De Koning's money because he's having a better season than him for starters.
Yeah, true.
Look, I will start this by saying I think the margin does slightly flatter St Kilda here.
Yes, it does.
Giants were in complete control, not just in control, like probably Collingwood were against Sydney. The Giants were in complete control of this game for a lot of it. St Kilda, to their credit, kept fighting till the end. They're getting good output from players who are still in that development phase, which is critical for the Saints, but they're still missing pieces there that I think will hold them back. Now, as for the Giants, they didn't fire out of the gates as well as they probably would have wanted to. They had to kind of readjust things on the fly. Their game style wasn't exactly working against Ross Lyon's setup.
Mhm.
So credit to Kingsley and the playing group. They worked their way around it, and by the end, they were pretty clearly the better side and deserved the win.
Yep, 100%. And Giants essentially stopped the entire last quarter, which is why you're saying the score flatters them. So the Saints just a smidge. All right, let's move on to this game, the last game of the round. Sunday, just joking. Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide. I mean, this looked like it was going to be an absolute bloodbath. Port Adelaide 18-13, 121, defeating the Hawks 14-7, 91, 30-point margin for a game that was at one point, I believe, 71-8. It had a lot of the hallmarks of the Port Adelaide Sydney game from last year, which ended up in an absolute shellacking, over 100 points, I believe, to Sydney. So the Hawks did manage to fight back, used a bit of that, that bit of vitriol, a bit of anger that was in this game, quite a lot of it as well, to fight their way back into it. And at one stage in the last quarter, you thought, hang on a second, they're surely not going to do this, are they? They're surely not going to come back from this massive, massive margin. But Port Adelaide got a couple of settlers in the last quarter to make sure that didn't happen, including the infamous double goal, because Willie Rioli showed the ball to CJ.
Yes.
I nearly said CK, but that's Calvin Klein. To CJ, and who then just decked him because he didn't like it, which is fair enough. I wouldn't like it either.
I probably would have done that too. But equally, I also probably would have shown the ball. So, really, I would have been the worst in both cases.
You just show the ball to someone else and then throw yourself into the fence. Good job.
I would have probably showed the ball to the goal umpire because I know he has to be a pacifist. Like, what are you going to do, mate? I'm kicking the goal. You've written, was this a gas league game for Hawthorn, or is it a case of they've been figured out? I think it's the former.
Okay.
Especially given the fact that they almost came back and won the game anyway. I just think Port Adelaide Oval still presents some danger even when they're bad, and I think right now they're getting close to that bad status.
That's what I thought a couple of weeks ago. They lost.
I'm getting quite tired of Port this season from a football season perspective. I'm finding them quite irksome.
Yes,
but I do have a friend that's a Port Adelaide supporter, and he does seem to oscillate between sack Hinkley to we may never lose again.
Sure.
Which is the way you should support your team. Ride the roller coaster.
100%.
It's a lot of fun. I do think we're seeing the importance of Zach Butters, though, to this Port Adelaide team. He is not only a flag flyer for them in the way that he carries himself and fights for Port Adelaide as a team, but he's also just a very good footballer. Interesting in his comments during the week, though, I don't know for how much longer he's going to be a Port Adelaide player.
Yeah.
He was very non-committal about extending his deal when asked. That's a huge worry because what we're seeing now is Port slipping. But at the same time, I don't think they're in a position to contend in the next 2 years after this season. So maybe that's the right call.
Maybe he's just playing hard to get, so they're offering more money. Think about that.
I want all of Alberton to be mine.
Yes.
Dredge the port and give it to me too while you're at it. Just give me everything.
Yeah, no, he was big, and I thought it very interesting in the post game with Rosie. I think it was Rosie. It was a Butters. Oh God, I can't remember. But one of them was interviewed about the argy-bargy through the match, and basically said, "I love it. It gets me going. It gets me fired up. It gets me wanting to play."
That was Zach, I think.
That was Zach. Yeah, makes sense. He was just like all about it. Georgiani is still starting to turn it around from a player that we thought.
I'm so confused by the concept of this Georgiadis. I don't know. Is he really good?
Yeah.
Or is he bad?
Yeah. Well, depends on the week, Jesse.
I think we might just have to settle with he's okay.
Yes. He is a player in the AFL. Yes.
He legally exists.
Oh, yes. But I mean, look.
Remains to be seen what happens with Hawthorn moving forward. They've got a big test.
They do.
On Monday. And I think I want to reserve my comments about where they're at for after that. I want to see another week of them against a good side. And they've beaten good sides this season. They beat the Giants down in Tassie, which is as good of a win as you could really ask for.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been lost to an inferior opposition in Port. So I'm not sure. I will say, though, Will Day looks like a big out for them.
Yes, he is. He's a little bit injury prone as well, which is a shame because every time he's in the team, he's a difference maker. But unfortunately, he seems to be out of the team quite a bit with injury, which sucks. Anything else to add about this gather round, Jesse? Before we call it a show?
You know what? Yes, I do have something to add.
Oh,
I'm interested to see how they build this in 2027. I would like for there to be a change in venues from Norwood for the Metropolitan ground.
Mhm.
But I do like the concept of Barossa, and I think that works. So I think that also was. I'm not sure what the lights situation is like, and also the logistics of it. But I would love to see them get the opportunity to host a Twilight game. Maybe not a straight out night game, but I'd love for them to be able to host something that's not a death slot game that not only people are not really going to go to. Like you get it, they're getting good crowds because people are there.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it, I think potentially the fact that it was Carlton Eagles as the alternative helped a lot for getting people out to watch North Gold Coast. But up against St Kilda Giants, if you're a dead set neutral and your choice is travel for Freo Richmond or stay relatively close down the road at Norwood for Giants Saints, I think you're probably going to choose the latter.
Yeah.
So I would really like to see them actually put thought into the fixturing of Gather Round. Actual concerted thought. And you know what? Even if you don't release the specific venues until the start of the season. Like, I know the floating fixture annoys people, but the key caveat here is as long as you lock in the times, you've got your Metropolitan ground and your regional ground. You call an audible, you make it happen. And you put good sides who have shown promise in the preseason, who are consensus top 4, top 8 teams.
Yep.
You reward them with Metropolitan games.
There you go. Good shout, Jesse. Good shout. Bring the lovely people home. Let's finish this up, eh?
Let's. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast for this episode. Make sure if you're on YouTube, you're liking, sharing, subscribing, and sticking around for our Just the Tips preview edition for round number 6. If you're on Spotify, Apple, or Amazon, a review is much appreciated. You can also follow us on Instagram at CMPerfect_AFL. But the best endorsement you can give us is word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell your neighbours, tell the person who's stuck next to you in the window seat on the flight back from Gather Round that you listen to this podcast. And it's really good. And you know what? If you're travelling to Perth, that's 3 hours. That's a solid 3 episodes you can listen to with them on the back catalogue. Yeah. 1 earphone each. Wouldn't that be nice? Until next time, we'll see you again soon on the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast.
Bye, everybody.